Jesus Christ, you took it to 100 so fucking fast.
This is our cold open.
Now recording.
Well, hello, and welcome to episode 38 of It's Never Sunny in Seattle, a Seattle Mariners podcast. I'm your host, Evan James, today, joined by Michael Ahedo, Joe Doyle, and Anders Jorstad. And while the hot stove has been in a deep freeze all winter, over the past several days, the temperature has started to tick back up. Major League Baseball recently met with the Players Association and made what I guess can be categorized as marginal progress. But after 2 months of stone cold silence, something is better than nothing, and I guess it is something. But probably the bigger Mariners news of the past week or so has been that the Baseball America top prospect rankings are out, which of course is headlined by Julio Rodriguez. We'll get into that, but first up, we're going to talk to Mariners prospect legend Joe Doyle to discuss the
Y'all have
immediate
to stop
matter.
throwing these damn labels on me.
Prospect legend.
This is how it happens. This is how I ended up on the radio, because y'all throw all these superlatives around and I don't know how they came about.
Hey, I'm happy to take credit for that.
Just John Troopin.
You, Joe.
Just tell us, you know when the lockout's going to end, right? We know you have sources.
No. The last time I tweeted about minor league baseball, the world got set on fire. So I stay away from the politics of it.
What happened?
I reported last 2020 that minor league baseball was canceled 4 days before it got canceled.
Ooh.
Yeah, and then the whole world distanced itself from me. So
I remember
that. I was
Yeah.
working with the minor league team at the time, and I was like, Joe, I'm sorry, but I can't talk to you. For like a
No,
few days.
I get it, man. I get it. I mean, I made a lot of I don't want to say enemies, but nobody liked that reporting, but I stand by it, man. Everything in that report was dead on.
Hey, now that I'm not
What can you
working
do?
for a minor league team, Joe, good for you, man.
I mean, I didn't love reporting that story. That was a bummer. That hurt a lot of people. Not the story, but just the cancellation in and of itself hurt a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
But anyways,
Well,
that's
We're still
2
doing
years
the
ago.
whole cancellation thing, so not much has changed, it would seem. At
Well,
least for
no, I
now.
mean minor league baseball is still going to happen. So now who's laughing? Now the big dogs won't get their pay.
Well, I guess let's start off with the international draft signing. So none of this actually happens till Tuesday. Is that correct? Nobody's signed officially yet?
They can sign. No, they can sign tomorrow. Tomorrow is when it opens up. It sounds like a couple of guys are going to sign for Seattle tomorrow, but the vast majority of them, at least what I'm gathering, are going to sign on Tuesday.
All right. Well, I have the list pulled up in front of me, but I guess, Joe, just start wherever you want. Tell us about some of these guys, because I don't think that most of our listeners have heard of any of these guys whatsoever, unless they obviously follow your Twitter feed. So this is all brand new info.
Yeah, I want to start at the top because I think the guy at the top is really interesting. Lazaro Montes is a first base / corner outfielder out of Cuba. You don't see these types of guys making their way onto top prospect lists. A little background on him: he's 6'3", 210, 215 pounds. I mean, and this is as a 17-year-old. He's a behemoth. Power hitter. Gets a lot of comps to Yordan Alvarez. But here's the thing. When you're talking about amateur baseball, when you're talking about, frankly, kids, 16 or 17-year-olds, when they're this big, this young, they're generally not rated very high, because with the size usually comes extremely limited athleticism and extremely limited versatility in terms of where they're going to end up on the diamond. I mean, the whole scouting adage goes, you can move a shortstop to third base, you can move a third baseman to first base. You can't move a first baseman anywhere. So for a kid that's 17 years old, already being labeled as a potential first baseman, to be ranked as high as, I've had one international scout say he's a top 3 player for him just because of the bat. I've had others Fangraphs is at 5, Baseball America is at, I think, 6, Pipeline's at 8. For him to be in that conversation, I think truly tells you how special the bat could be. It's all fields power. It could be 70 grade raw power at the end of the day, like Ryan Howard type power. So it could be a prodigious bat. I do want to just say, even though the bat is that special and everything looks the part, he still is facing on a day-to-day basis guys throwing 81 to 84. So
Good
the true test of time still comes when he sees spin, when he sees real velo, and that comes with time. So, but
Yeah.
he's exciting, man. I think Montez is up there with the grading that Julio was receiving when he was picked or when he was signed. But Julio was never what Julio was until like a year and a half after he signed, and he got into better shape and he started hitting. But in terms of the pure bat, I think Lazaro Montez is every bit the pure bat that Julio was when he came up. Whether he makes the adjustments Julio made remains to be seen.
That's very exciting. And obviously over the last couple of years, it feels like outside of Julio, the Mariners have had somewhat mixed results with high international draft picks. How do you feel about their current crop compared to some of the crops they've taken over the last couple of years? And obviously, is there anybody else who sticks out to you as being like somebody who could be a really fast riser? We talked a little bit earlier this week in the Slack about Kudo. My apologies if I didn't pronounce that correctly, but Juan Kudo has already been moved to pitcher from shortstop. So even in just the last couple of draft picks, we're already seeing some attrition, some shifting going on. So what do you think of this class as it compares to the others?
I think what stands out about this class is Seattle really, truly over the last 4 or 5 years with the Julio signing, with Noelvi Marte signing, they've really gone after quality. There's two ways to go about this, and truly everyone has a different opinion. On one hand, you can spend a lot of money on one guy and use a lot of your bonus pool and, go for the big star. And it's really worked for Seattle. I mean, Julio and Noelvi Marte look like every bit the dollars that were spent on them. But, you look at Robert Puason, you look at some of these other guys that have come up that have just fizzled out. It doesn't always work that way. So some will say go after quality, some will say go after quantity so you have more bites at the apple. I generally think going after quality is the better way of going about things. And this is a really quality class. It looks like they're going to take 7 or 8 more people in this class. It's a better class than what 2020 was with Starling Aguilar. I think 2019 was a pretty light class, super quantity based. I think Juan Pinto might have been in that class, or he was in 2021 as well. He was in 21. I think actually Karakuto was the, maybe the shining star of 2020. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to go back. But anyways, I don't even know if they had a 7-figure guy that year. 2018, you had Noelvi. 2017, you had Julio, and going back before that, it was a lot more quantity over quality. So this is definitely a better class than, in my estimation, it's probably a better class than the last 2 classes, just because it is top heavy. I mean, we haven't even talked about Michael Arroyo yet, who's going to be a second 7-figure guy. But we'll see. I mean, these classes really are tested over time, more than even the MLB draft. I mean, these amateurs take 5 years to get to the highest level.
So tell us a little bit about Michael Arroyo, because he's the other, like you said, big name probably to headline that list so far today.
Yeah, Michael Arroyo, 6'2", 190 pound, 195 pound, third base, first base bat. Colombian, gonna probably sign for $1.2 million. Everything I've heard is it's just hit. He's a guy that has a solid bat, not a great athlete, pretty good arm, can get it across the diamond. It's not anything special, probably just an average arm, below average athlete, maybe runs into average power. I've heard some wild comps, so wild that I'm probably not even going to bring them up, but just think of think of a hit first third baseman with sublime bat to ball skills. And that's always a great starting block for any player that is looking to make their mark and move quickly. I mean, you look at some of the other guys that Seattle has signed, like Starling Aguilar and Milkar Perez. These guys both came up with sublime bat to ball skills, and they made an impact right away in 2021 at complex level ball as some of the standouts in that league with batting average and strikeout rate and walk rate. So if nothing else, it should make for a really easy transition for Michael into pro ball. He probably won't get tested until he sees Everett in high A, and that's going to be the case with a lot of these guys that are kind of renowned for their bat. But yeah, pure hitter. That's kind of the story here.
It's going to be really hard to not mix up Michael Arroyo and Edwin Arroyo if they're both, coming up around the same time.
Yeah, there's a Michael Arroyo that's also in the minor leagues right now that I believe was a 2017 draft pick too. I'm trying to remember where he plays, maybe Atlanta. So yeah, they're not making it easy on anyone.
But based on what you're saying, he's basically the opposite of Edwin Arroyo, because isn't Edwin Arroyo's thing his glove at shortstop?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Edwin Arroyo is a project when it comes to the bat. There's some bat to ball there. There's some twitchy hands, but he's going to make all of his money on the dirt. He's a pure shortstop. He should stick at the position so long as his athleticism holds up. Michael Arroyo, on the other hand, is listed as a shortstop right now. I'm already being told he is a definitive third baseman, and a lot of people think with the athleticism he's going to be shifted over to first base as he continues to fill out his frame. So yeah, much different. Arroyo certainly, by the looks of it, is not going to be a guy that makes his money on the dirt.
Obviously, a couple of these guys are going to be, like you said, seven figures. Jerry DiPoto has said before, kind of the buzzword that Kate really doesn't like in particular is the penny slots phrase for some of these guys in terms of level of investment financially, but also kind of an indicator of the relative level of expectations for some of them, that they are kind of lottery tickets. Do you think that signing some of these more expensive guys signals a philosophical shift in how they plan to invest internationally going forward, or is this just kind of a one-off thing because they like these guys?
That's a really good question. I don't know how much of it is philosophical and how much of it is forced by the talent within the front office. I mean, Frankie Thon Jr. is the director of international scouting for the Seattle Mariners, and more than anything in international scouting, you are relationship building. You are building networks. You are getting buddy with the trainers and the academies, and encouraging these guys to sign with the Seattle Mariners. Why sign with the Seattle Mariners? It's a recruiting trip, if you will. So I think on one hand, you're never going to walk away from the top talent if they're going to listen. Like if Julio Rodriguez is going to listen and he's willing to take your money, you take that investment. If Noelvi Marte or Felnin Celestin next year, or Lazaro Montes this year is willing to listen and they're willing to take your money, I think you'd be foolish to walk away from that sort of an opportunity. Now, you can certainly make the case that depending on the state of your farm system, it makes more sense to acquire, 15 $500,000 guys or 15 $400,000 investments instead of 7 to 9 investments with two big anchors at the top, like the Angels, for example. That would make complete sense. Go sign 15 people and more bites at the apple. But with Seattle, you have potentially 15 big leaguers at the top of your farm system right now, and it's deep. So why not continue to spend money on the big guy, add trade assets? There's a number of different ways that you can attack this. And I think given Seattle's strength of their farm system, they have no reason not to go after the top guys and continue to supplement.
I like that a lot. Do you think that, and again, this is kind of tough to gauge because you have to be familiar to some degree with the other international programs in baseball, which I am not. And I think most of our listeners probably are not as well. But do you think the Mariners have been better than average, or perhaps you would say it's a strength of the organization, our ability to develop international talent, especially in the wake right now of Julio being arguably the best prospect in baseball and Noelvi being one of the biggest risers over the past year?
That's a good question. I think more than anything, Seattle is certainly acquiring top talent, and that top talent is just panning out. I mean, when you sign Noelvi Marte and you sign Julio Rodriguez and you sign, guys like Juan Pinto is coming and he just looks every bit the part. Yeah, I mean, they've had a lot of success. The thing is, though, Seattle, a lot of these guys haven't made it to the big leagues yet. They're pushing their way up the development ladder, but we don't know what Julio is going to be or what Noelvi Marte is going to be. I mean, Juan Pinto is one of our top 25 prospects in a deep system, and he hasn't even made his debut yet. I mean, he's 17. So Christian Cardozo had mixed results. I think that remains to be seen. But whenever you're bringing in top talent, your chances of finding success, I think, would have to be better than the alternative.
That's something that
But
I was going to bring up because
in terms of comparing them to other organizations, they're finding a lot more success than most organizations. I mean, I would say Seattle's a top 10 organization, both in acquiring international talent and developing it. If you're looking at it from a 6-year vacuum.
in terms of development, I think that the Mariners have a pretty, pretty high regarded in terms of how they develop players. But I think especially on the hitting side, and I think we've talked about this before. I don't know how much of it is deserved because really your number one is Kyle Lewis, who looks like a legitimate big leaguer and hitter, but also he's a first rounder. And they've also seen guys like Evan White be able to hit the ball really hard, but not look particularly great. So, and also, Jared Kelenic struggled at an unprecedented level. So I'm really interested to see, especially I think with the higher draft picks, how they continue to develop, because I am really worried about the Mariners' ability to develop hitters, because most of it's come on the pitching side.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, they clearly have a strength. But in terms of hitting, I think hitting is just harder, especially when you're taking teenagers at the international level. It's such a lottery. It's such a crapshoot. You don't know how they're going to react with money for the first time in their hands. But yeah, clearly college pitching has been a strength, and acquiring pitching in general. I mean, Paul Sewald, Casey Sadler, Drew Steckenrider, Chris Flexen, they know what they're doing with arms.
I would agree with what you said, that hitting is definitely harder. Pitching is a finesse thing, but it also can be taught in terms of, repeatability of delivery, in terms of just being in the right shape for it, in terms of having the endurance for it. It's much harder to do hand-eye coordination improvement for hitting. And it's why you see some guys who can just kind of stick it and other guys who have all the tools to do it and just sort of can't. That's kind of one of the great things about baseball that makes it so exciting and unique as a sport, is that being able to hit a baseball with a little wooden stick is really, really, really hard and really impressive. And those who can do it are just kind of a special breed. But do you guys have any other questions for Joe as it relates to the international prospects, or should we move on to the exciting guys at the top of our Baseball America rankings?
I think we'll have more as things come, but for now, I think it's pretty well covered.
All right. We'll keep an eye on that, but let's talk Julio. Let's talk Julio, right?
Let's talk Julio.
Talk Julio. Julio is the number one prospect in baseball. Maybe number 2, number 3, maybe top 5, depending on which ranking you're going for. But he's up there. He's probably the best position prospect the Mariners have had, depending on what you feel about Kyle Lewis in a generation, really, and Kelenic, I guess. So it hasn't been that long, I guess. But yeah, Joe, you talked a little bit about Julio on 710 this week. I want to know a couple things. One is, do you think he has any realistic shot of breaking camp with the team? And 2, Jared struggled a lot last year. What are kind of your expectations for how Julio might handle the transition differently?
So to answer the first question, I think Julio right now, if you're asking me, probably has like a 5 or a 10% chance of breaking camp. The reason I say that is he needs so many things to go right for him. He needs probably multiple injuries in the outfield. He probably needs the organization to not acquire another free agent outfield bat. You look at the way that the lineup is set up right now. I mean, Kyle Lewis, Mitch Haniger, Jared Kelenic. I mean, that's 3 starters right there. I know I'm missing someone. Who am I missing?
Jake Fraley?
Jake Fraley doesn't count. Yeah, Jake Fraley doesn't really count.
Did you say Haniger?
Trammell, yeah, I said Haniger. So, I mean, in any case, you're looking at, 3 to 5 guys there. I would even put Dylan Moore in that case if he has a strong spring.
Mm-hmm.
If you acquire another outfielder, that's 6 or 7 guys. When Julio comes up, Julio's going to play every single day. No doubt about it. And I'm just not sure Seattle wants to put Julio in that situation, having never played at AAA, having barely played at AA, and having 4 capable outfielders already on the roster with probably a fifth on the way. I mean, we don't know. Taylor Trammell is going to be 25 this year.
Mm-hmm.
He could break out in camp just like he did last year. And if Trammell has a big camp again, he'll be on the roster. He's probably the best defensive center fielder in the organization right now, at least at the top. So it's an uphill battle. Short of him signing an extension with the team, I don't see it happening, but I wouldn't expect him to be in the minor leagues on June 1st. I'll put it that way. I think he's going to be up pretty quick. In terms of his struggles, the thing with Kelenic that's really interesting, right? We talked about it for, goodness, it had to have been a year leading up to his debut, just in anticipation. And everyone said the ability is there. The ability is unquestionable. But how is he going to react to failure? Jared Kelenic has never failed from the time he was 7 years old. And everyone called it. I mean, Jared Kelenic failed, and you could tell he could not compartmentalize. He couldn't deal with it. He didn't know how to react to it. And it spiraled on him. But when he finally got his feet under him there in August and September, the ability came out. He was he might have been the best rookie in baseball for those 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're going to see that with Julio. Julio's probably going to come up and be a little bit more prepared. He's a little bit more light on his feet, happy-go-lucky. And I don't think he's going to be gangbusters right out of the gate. I mean, maybe he is, but you're probably talking about a guy that comes up and his first year he hits, 240, 255, runs into 15 to 20 home runs. If you give me Julio June through September and you give me 400 at bats, I think he's probably a 1.5 win player, maybe a 1.8 win player. I think the scary thing for the American League is you get that guy's feet under him and you continue to refine his pitch recognition and you show him the good side. I mean, he could be a 4-win player in 2023 and then all of a sudden in 2024 you're talking about a guy that is in the All-Star game, is fighting for awards. I mean, you look at what Vlad did, and let me be clear, Vlad is a better hitter than Julio is. It's in the numbers. He's just a better hitter. But Vlad struggled, in quotes, in 2020 or 2019, I can't remember what it was, and was arguably the best pure hitter. I mean, he was the best pure hitter in baseball last year. So it doesn't take long, and Julio's exactly the model type of player that you get his feet wet, and he's going to take off like a rocket. So don't expect him to be a superstar right out of the gate, but so long as he looks like he's up for the challenge in 2022, I just think the future is so bright with that kid.
Do you think, to an extent, that Juan Soto has kind of like broken expectations for fans when it comes to prospects, and that we're all like just going to see any prospect that doesn't automatically blow up as a failure from the jump?
They all have. I mean, Soto had like 110 bats in high A, and they were like, that's good. Fernando Tatis, he wasn't even he was like barely a top 30 prospect in his international class and just took off. And now he's, arguably a top 3 player in the National League. Vladimir Guerrero, I came up just immediately as a 22-year-old. Probably maybe the best offensive player in the American League. I mean, year after year, there's a new guy coming up and just resetting the precedent of what an international superstar prospect should be. And it's certainly not fair to the guys that are coming. I mean, Noelvi Marte, Marco Luciano, even Julio, like it's just such a high bar to place on guys.
Any other questions for Joe about Julio before we have him do a little bit about Kirby and wrap up? Mikey? All right. Well, you did the segment on 710. You are the Kirby Whisperer. For those who missed it, it was a good segment on the Mike Salk show, Joe Doyle. But Kirby is interesting because he hasn't pitched enough or pitched on camera basically at all over the past couple of years since he's been drafted, where anyone's gotten a very good look at him. But the reports have been so sterling coming out of everywhere over the last year about the fastball ticking up and the stuff being so good that there's just a lot of buzz around him right now. My question that we talked about earlier today in the Slack was, what can we expect as far as a timeline for George Kirby to debut in the majors, and how much is he actually going to pitch this year? Because he threw, and correct me if I'm wrong, but under 70 innings last year and virtually 0 the year before. So we're talking about a guy who, if he is to come up partway through the year, similar to like the Logan Gilbert timeline, is in line to throw quite a few innings. And so both, when do you think we see him, and how do you think the Mariners manage some of that?
Yeah, well, so keep in mind with Gilbert, the first month of minor league baseball was pushed back in 2021. So his first start of the season was May 1st or May 5th. And that was his only start in minor league baseball. And then he came up and, I mean, he pitched the whole year, but you take away an entire month of starts and suddenly limiting innings gets a lot easier. I think he's going to be on a similar track. With George Kirby's shoulder fatigue, they're going to have to play it safer than they did with Logan Gilbert. I mean, Logan Gilbert didn't miss a start. He never showed any signs of wearing down, at least physically. And they kept him at about 110 innings, I want to say, maybe 120. I think for Kirby, you're probably looking at 100 innings, maybe 105, 110. I'm going to be really interested to see how they use Kirby right out of the gates, because if I think a great way to limit innings would be to slowly ramp him up in April and May. I mean, if you were to throw Kirby out there for opening day at Double-A, and then don't let him pitch again for 10 days, and then don't let him pitch again for 8 days, and then 7 days, and then 6, and then you just kind of skip some days in there as you can, and then finally, get him on that 5-day schedule as we get closer to June. That's a good way to limit his innings. I expect to see George Kirby in the majors the first half of June, depending on so long as he stays healthy. But unlike Julio, I do think George Kirby is going to be quite effective pretty much immediately. But that's how pitchers are, right? I mean, if you're a good pitcher, I think the old adage is if you've got live bullets in the chamber, don't waste them in the minor leagues. And George Kirby has live bullets. He's going to be effective right away, just so long as the spotlight isn't too bright. So I'm really excited to see him. He's going to be, when you call up Jared Kelenic, you think, okay, I hope this is an upgrade to the lineup. When you call up George Kirby, you say, okay, this is going to be an upgrade to whoever he's replacing.
Any questions about George Kirby, guys? If not, I have one more question for all of us.
I mean, just thinking, I don't know. I don't really like throwing comps on players, but I am wondering who you kind of compare him to. One person that comes to mind for me, just because at this point, his fastball is his best weapon. The secondaries obviously have flashed, have gotten better, but there's not I wouldn't call any of them wipeout, maybe a slider. And just with his command, I kind of think of Tyler Mahle, but I was wondering if you had anyone in the next, thinking about Kirby in the next year or two, who kind of comps to him.
I talked about this on the radio show the other day. What isn't brought up enough about Kirby is his pitch shaping isn't that good. I mean, his fastball shape, not to get too far into the weeds, but it's like 15 IVB. It's like 7 inches of horizontal break. I mean, it's a dead zone fastball, right? But if you're throwing it 100 miles an hour, it doesn't really matter if you know where it's going. The slider shape, squarely average, but he throws it 88 miles an hour. So you tunnel that off the fastball, and all of a sudden you have a pretty dynamic 2-pitch mix. I love the changeup shape. I think that's his best pitch shape, and he can flip a curveball over way more effectively than what Logan Gilbert could do. I don't like throwing. It really does make me uncomfortable to speak the Shane Bieber thing with him, but I do think there's a lot of similarities. I mean, Bieber does not have a great fastball. Bieber does not have a great breaking ball. The curveball is very good. It's probably a plus curveball, but his pitch shape is fairly ordinary. What he can do is he can hit any zone with any pitch, and he can mix it up. He can pitch backwards, and I think that's what you're looking for in George Kirby. I don't throwing a Cy Young Award win comp on Kirby is not fair, and I totally understand that.
You want to do it, Joe. You said it on the radio.
No.
You want to do it.
No, we are talking about a prototype right-handed body with excellent command, whose entire arsenal will play up better than it actually is because he can pitch. So I kind of like the Mahle thing. That's an interesting comp as well. But yeah, I mean, Kirby's just going to be super effective, and it's not going to be sexy besides the radar gun.
It is a little troubling, I think, that the Mariners haven't been able to kind of smooth out, the secondary stuff. Like the Cleveland Guardians, I think at this point are pretty well known for taking guys, really like command plus or command first guys, and teaching them secondaries and letting them, pitch with 45, 50 grade fastballs and teaching them a secondary or two. To me, there aren't that many examples of the Mariners being able, even though they've been able to develop pitchers, they haven't really developed pitches for the most part. And even with like Edwin Diaz, that was, I don't remember, Benoit or someone that showed him his slider grip. So
yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So I don't know.
That's a good point.
It kind of makes sense in terms of Bieber, just with what you were saying about pitch shape, except in this case, Bieber was coming up throwing, I don't know, 92, and even before, I think Kirby was throwing a little harder. So I think he might be my favorite prospect in baseball, just because I'm partial to pitching.
I had one scout. I had one scout give me an interesting like dichotomy of the two directions that George Kirby could go. On one hand, he was like, he could be Shane Bieber. Like, he could be Jacob deGrom light. Like, when you're throwing these breaking balls, it doesn't matter what the shape is. If you're throwing them that hard, like Lance McCullers, you're going to find success, even if the shape isn't like mind-boggling. But the other route that he could go is the Mitch Keller route, like the Pittsburgh Pirates route. Like, hey, these guys are prototype righties. They have massive stuff. Like Chad Kuhl was actually a pretty big deal in terms of prospects. They have massive stuff, massive fastball, really good breaking ball, but they never really find it because for one reason or another, for bumps and bruises along the way, slow their development. They don't ever learn how to pitch. And he's like, I don't really see that happening because George Kirby knows how to pitch before he knows how to do anything else. So yeah, I found that interesting. I think so long as Kirby doesn't lose his command, I really don't think there's a huge risk of him fizzling out. I mean, or him getting hurt, I should say. But yeah, as long as he keeps his command and stays healthy, I think you're talking about a number 3 at worst.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more? Sorry, go ahead.
No, you can go. I mean, I was just going to say it makes sense with Keller, but yeah, kind of like you were saying, Keller definitely doesn't have the command that Kirby does, and he never threw anywhere, as hard as Kirby did. So I can definitely see that.
Yeah, or maybe like a Jameson Taillon, or someone like that. Like Taillon used to throw hard. He was a mechanical nightmare. He hurt his arm a little bit, but yeah, well, I mean, we'll see what happens. But I'm awfully optimistic on George Kirby. And just to think, Seattle knows what it's doing with pitch shaping. Like they may not have been able to inject that sort of wisdom and change and knowledge on some of their pitchers, whether that be operationally they're not able to make those changes. But you just think with Kirby's arm talent, if he does reach a point where he learns how to shape his pitches, I mean, the sky is the limit. Like when Felix came up, and this is not a comp, but when Felix came up, it was fastball, curveball, or die. Like that's all he was. Like I'm going to throw 100 and I'm going to buckle the knees. The changeup and sinker were his best pitch for like 2/3 of his career, and he learned those 2 or 3 years into his career. Imagine if George Kirby actually learns how to pronate a little bit and get more ride on the fastball. I mean, that would be pretty remarkable. So we'll see what happens. I'm just excited to see where the next couple of years goes with him.
Joe, I know you got to go soon. Do you have time for one question about one more player that we haven't discussed yet? Okay.
Yeah, let's go, man.
So, the Baseball America top 10 just came out, and this is the first time I think that I've seen someone label Emerson Hancock as reliever potential. I know there's been some concern about his health and about other things within these last couple of years. I feel like in general, we've kind of soured on him, and he's kind of been forgotten about with all the hype of Gilbert and all the hype of Kirby. Do you share those reliever concerns about Hancock, and if so, why would that be?
I think the only reason for the reliever concerns would be the durability, just the shoulder fatigue, the tiredness in the arm. He's got 4 pitches. He's got the curveball, the slider. He's got the changeup, the 2-seam, and he's got 5 pitches. He's got the 4-seam. I've seen them all. So whether or not he wears down and the shoulder can't handle a starter's workload would be the big thing. But Emerson Hancock has all of the pitches. Now, I will say, just to be a contrarian, I've never seen the plus changeup that people have thrown on Hancock. Personally, I've always felt he's mostly a 4-seam, 2-seam slider guy. But if the changeup is what other people are seeing, then he still has mid-rotation upside. I would say this about Emerson Hancock: let's not make any judgments on what he is or what he's going to be until the guy has like a healthy season. Like, he was drafted in 2020. The season was knocked. 2021 was his first year in full season ball, and he dealt with arm fatigue. So I don't think it's really fair to judge the kid on that. He's still only 23 years old.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll let Joe go, but I'm gonna have you part with a little guess here. I'm gonna ask everybody. We have a couple of young arms coming up this year. We have Matt Brash, who might already be up. We have George Kirby. We have Emerson Hancock, and we have Brandon Williamson. Pick one of those guys to have the best season for the Mariners in terms of WAR.
Oh, in terms of WAR?
Mm-hmm. Not innings, not ERA, not strikeouts. Who contributes the most value to this team?
Give me the pitchers one more time.
Matt Brash,
Williamson, Brash,
Hancock, and Kirby. So those 4.
Okay, so I think Kirby will definitely have the most WAR, but I think Williamson is going to have the second most WAR behind that, because I think he's going to log some pretty lengthy big league innings. Like, he might approach 1 WAR this year. Matt Brash, I'm fairly convinced, is going to be in the bullpen within like 5 starts. I mean, his arm talent is unbelievable, but his fastball command isn't there, and his stuff, especially his command, really fades hard in like the 4th and 5th inning. So, I mean, maybe he makes an enormous jump in 2022 and starts to show more fastball command, and that he can stay in a rotation. But I generally think he's going to be a pretty explosive, electric, high leverage reliever.
I'm just going to go with Brash just because he's on the 26 man.
That's true.
Yeah, I was also going to go with
Brash.
Brash.
The easy answer is Brash if he starts all year, right?
Yeah.
Well, I just think
relievers just don't.
2 Brash and a Kirby, right?
Go ahead.
I don't know what that reference is.
2 Brash and a
Kirby. 2 Brash and a Kirby. I think I'm going to have to pick Williamson, because I think he's going to accrue the most innings of any of those names, kind of like you said, Joe, and just by sheer happenstance of that, even if he doesn't pitch that well, he's going to be like Chris Flexen light and, have like a pretty decent season. But I like the Kirby pick, and I like the Brash pick because he is on the 26 man. There is a chance he just takes off in the rotation, and that this is a moot point because he's just awesome, which would be cool. But Joe, we're going to let you go. Thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful to have you. Good segment this week on 710. For any of our listeners who don't listen to 710, you don't have to listen to 710. It's not the greatest experience, but Joe is always a bright spot in the morning with Mike Salk or whoever else he's on with, talking baseball. So thank you so much for your time, Joe.
Yeah, and before you go, why don't you plug? Why don't you plug like where people can find you?
Yeah, I mean, you can find a lot of my writing at Prospects Live, but I think I spend about 75%, 80% of my time right now over at, did I say Lookout Landing or did I say Prospects Live?
You said Prospects Live.
Oh, you can find some of my work at Lookout Landing. I spend 80% of my time over at Prospects Live doing MLB draft previews, international draft previews. So you can find a ton of stuff on the draft over there. Or at Joe Doyle, MILB on Twitter.
There you go. All right. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was great.
Thanks for stopping in.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, man. Take it easy, guys. See ya.
Celebrity guest spot win. I like it. All right. taking us back in. Do you guys want to talk about Seiya or Rachel Balkovec, or do we want to talk about the lockout first?
Probably lockout.
Yeah.
Take us yours. You weren't here last time.
I think maybe the Balkovec. I don't know how to say her last name. I feel bad. I never watched like any of the videos. But I think the lockout stuff will segue into the Suzuki stuff. So
Yeah, that's cool with me. You can do that.
Maybe let's talk about some women in baseball.
Mikey, kick us off.
Yeah, the Yankees hired Rachel Balkovec as their single A manager. That's one thing. And then also, in I forgot what the Australian their baseball league is, but they had a woman pitching, and not only pitching but also shoving. So I mean, that's two different women in I think less than 1 week that are, really breaking through that glass ceiling, or breaking down those barriers. So I don't know. We've heard people's commentary on the Balkovec, kind of promotion, or whatever, and it's not I forgot what you call it, like a diversity hire or whatever. Like, she is legit. I think we talked a little bit about it pre-show. I am really interested to see how it goes in terms of fan interaction and how fans talk about it, because even at the MLB level, there is a certain level of like an adversarial kind of relationship with like analytics. You can't even have stats nerds in the dugout. To have a woman in the dugout that's like not a trainer or whatever, I'm a little bit worried about how that goes. But the more we have Kim Angs and Rachel Balkovec's, I think the more normalized it'll become, and the more that men will have to deal with it, and I think that's a good thing. So it's a huge deal.
I really hope for her sake that she's allowed to do her job with as little interference, I suppose, as possible. And I mean that in the sense that as somebody who worked in minor league baseball, I know how it's going to go. You go to these small towns where not much happens, and she's going to be the story at every new city she goes to. And I hope for her sake that there's kind of a buffer zone built where she can just kind of like do that with as little, having to answer the same questions all the time as much as possible. Because I'm sure that for her, she probably just wants to be able to do her job. And as you guys also mentioned in the pre-show, the Yankee media famously not quiet and also not very kind. So, I'm hopeful that, she's got a pretty good support system in place, and I'm hopeful that she's able to do her job well.
To Mikey's point about kind of women in baseball, I think a number one question you get from, I don't want to say sexist, but people who are skeptical of this kind of change is that maybe she's unqualified, and she's really freaking qualified. She has a master's degree in kinesiology, which is kinetic movement, and then she also has another degree in advanced human movement. So she's being brought in as a coach, but she also has a very proprietary and modern, for lack of a better term, skill set in terms of what she can bring to the baseball team. Echoes of Lorena Martin a little bit when I hear those kinds of things, but when we hired Lorena Martin, that was the right idea, to bring somebody in who had that expertise and do those things. It went poorly for the Mariners, but it was a good idea to have somebody, looking at those kinds of things that she was supposed to be doing in the clubhouse. And I'm really interested to see how this goes for Balkovec. Like you said, the New York media is really rough, but she gets to be in A-ball and kick this off. And it sounds like the Yankees really like her. I just was reading over this before we started the podcast, but she coached a little bit for the Latin leagues in the Yankee system, so she's already kind of familiar with the system. And I'm just really excited to see how it all goes for her and see her rise in the organization. And like Mikey said, we need more women in baseball. Baseball has been an old man sport for a long time. Diversity is a good thing. We can always use a new perspective. This is a good thing. And I like to throw this statistic out when it comes to, in particular, hiring women, but any segment of society, any hiring field, any industry in which women are not at least 50% of the hirees, they are an undervalued asset by default. So baseball has a lot of work to do in finding those assets and putting them in positions where they can be positive progression for both the team and the sport. So I think this is an overwhelmingly good thing. Is that comprehensive? I hope that wasn't just gibberish on my part.
There are a few things that I have to say. One is that it is kind of we talk about how qualified she is. She's overqualified,
Yeah.
Her and Lorena Martin. Well, I guess
that's its own sticky thing, but in theory, yes.
But like, especially Kim Ang. Kim Ang should have been a GM 20 years ago.
Right.
Did interview for the Mariners GM position during the Zarenzek era. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, when I was writing the article about I forgot his name, Jared Porter. I think it was that. I just remember, going back and finding some old news clippings and articles from the early 2000s and just how qualified she was back then. So that's one thing, is like, to be a woman in sports, you have to be better than your male counterparts. The other is that, there's still, I'm trying to think, there's a Red Sox hitting coach and maybe for another team, but it's also always a white woman that is the first woman to to meet whatever, not milestone, I can't think of the word, but basically to achieve certain accomplishments. So I mean, I think it's kind of hard to strike that balance between celebrating this, because this is an awesome thing, but I think it's also important to think about the difference between the role that white women play in sports as opposed to women of color, and non-binary people. So yeah.
There's anything to add, or shall we move on?
No, that's good for me.
All right. Women in baseball, we are extremely supportive. We like it. We want to see more of it. Mariners, maybe hire a female coach.
I did also want to shout out, hold on. The Cubs hired a female amateur scout as well.
I do remember this, actually.
Which I'm trying to find if I can get her name.
Was this recent?
Yes.
I'm trying to think. That sounds familiar.
I can't find her name for whatever reason, but the Mariners also have Amanda Hopkins as well. She's been doing the same work for Seattle for the last several years.
Well, the Mariners have an AGM, right? That's a woman.
She doesn't do any of the baseball stuff. She's like an accountant / business manager more than she does anything on the athletic side of it, so to speak.
No, you're right. I could have sworn that they hired like an assistant general manager as but I don't think they did. So ignore me.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about let's move this into the lockout. So we've heard a little bit about the initial pitch. So the two sides met this week. Major League Baseball and the Players Union met this week. And they discussed some terms. Apparently the players were not very happy because it was like a partial plan. It was only some of the things that they had talked about. And, even though they'd been off for 6-9 weeks, whatever break they've taken over the holidays, they were disappointed there wasn't something more comprehensive brought forth. But it does do a couple of things. I'm going to let you talk about this, Durs, because I like to get your opinions on these things, and also because I'm only loosely familiar with kind of some of the details of this. I went over it on Twitter and pieced some things together, obviously, because there isn't a comprehensive list of this stuff because it's all still in flux. So we're piecing our information together from multiple sources. Um, but the thing I wanted to ask you about in particular to kick it off with is the compensation for the draft pick success, which seems to have been something that was met with some fanfare online, and I'm confused as to why, because it sounds like a bad thing to me, but I'm
Yeah.
wondering what you think about it.
I think it's pretty ridiculous. So the basically in order to get this draft pick of compensation, the team would have to promote a prospect who is within the top 100. I presume MLB pipeline because it's an MLB rule, so it would have to be an MLB pipeline top 100 prospect, which I think is a weird arbitrary system because that's definitely something that can be gamed by organizations trying to encourage the results of Jonathan Mayo and Jim Callis and all them, whatever they put as the top 100. Like, I'm sure they can convince them to not put a guy at number 93 in the list or whatever. But first of all, so they have to be a top 100 prospect. And there's no defined rules that I could find as to this next rule, but they have to not have been like held down, like it has, like basically not have been like purposely held down, which I don't know how the heck they determine that. And then that prospect has to either win or place for a major 3 award, so Rookie of the Year, MVP, or Cy Young within their first 3 years in the big leagues. And if those criteria are all met, then the team will get a draft pick based upon how successful that player is, basically. And these rules just seem so arbitrary. And like, I bet nobody is ever going to achieve this exact scenario. Like, this is not going to prevent a team from keeping down Bobby Witt Jr. Also because, for example, an extra year of Bobby Witt Jr. with how good he probably is going to be is a lot more valuable than some, draft pick that you're putting a number on that, you'll never see for 3 years. And if you do, that player won't be up for 8 years. And he probably won't be as good as Bobby Witt whenever he does come up. So, it's just very weird. I don't really understand how this helps anything. It seems like baseball is trying to basically put like a "we tried" sticker on it without actually tackling the actual problem, which is exactly what baseball wants to do. They don't want to tackle the problem of arbitration, because if you make arbitration an age thing, that immediately stops the gaming of the system. Because if you know that a player is going to hit arbitration when they turn 25 or 26 or whatever, then you're going to want your players up earlier if they're good. You're not going to want to waste years of Julio in the minor leagues when his clock is ticking the second he signs with the team as an international free agent. Mm-hmm. And that's like the obvious solution to stop the gaming of service time, but baseball doesn't want to talk about that for obvious reasons.
Mikey, there were a couple of very loose concessions in terms of things like paying players who have 2 years of service time a little bit more. I believe it was $570,000 up to $600,000 a year minimum salary. Do you feel that anything you read about what they actually intend to pay players more or compensate them more was of any real substance, or is this just kind of a shuffling of deck chairs, so to speak?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I'm trying to think who it was, maybe Susan Slusser. One of the most significant things I think that came out of what we learned from, I think, yesterday, is that both sides seem pretty amenable to the universal DH. I almost feel like I saw Durr's tweet about this, but I do wonder if the owners try to use that as like a leveraging thing still.
Yeah, that was my concern.
Yeah. I do think that that's good for baseball. I think it improves the watchability of baseball, and I'll admit I have historically, thought it was pretty fun to watch Felix go up and swing a bat, and I think Felix really liked it too, but
Johan didn't like it so much.
Yeah. To have 2 leagues playing with very, very different rules for, 75% of the year plus is very strange. So, yeah, honestly, I mean, I think I think that we've inched closer, but out of hundreds of yards. So I don't know. I think things are a little bit better, but you can tell by how unhappy the union is, the players union, that it's really not close. So I don't know. I think a lot of people after yesterday were really starting to feel the the very real certainty that spring training is in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm. Durs, do you think that, I don't want to say MLB is not acting in good faith, but when I read some of the notions of this proposal and what's been purported online about it, it feels like these are band-aids on open wounds. And that's an obtuse metaphor, but what they've essentially said is we're not going to change anything, and we'll do very small concessions that on paper say they are a thing, but players with 2 years of service time going from 570 to 600K is the smallest pennies I can possibly imagine for Major League Baseball.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's kind of like we'll go from $15 to $15.50 an hour kind of raise. It just seems like nothing to me. Do you see Major League Baseball doing real concessions and the players getting some of what they want? Or are we going to be here in a month, 2 months talking about how nothing has changed really?
I'm gonna caveat my answer and say both. And the reason is because, and I think Jeff Passan has kind of alluded to this, but this is a negotiation process. And in a negotiation process, neither side is going to immediately cave to the other side because they both think, they can get closer to their side if they hold out longer. And also the second part of that is once the deadline approaches and they start to actually become in danger of losing things, they're going to ramp up their intensity, and one side is going to cave more than the other, and eventually they'll agree to a deal. Now, the owners have nothing to gain from the outset accepting a major piece of something that players want right now. They're going to do these little piecemeal things here and there. They're going to offer scraps, and I think the players are going to, probably propose a deal in a week or so that's going to be similar in terms of movement, that they're going to offer a scrap or two, and it's not going to be perceived well by the owners, and we're going to get the same exact thing from their side. And that's probably just how it's going to be until we get really, really close to things becoming actually dangerous. So I think, if you've got tickets to a spring training game in early March, you're probably not feeling too great right now, and you probably shouldn't. In fact, my parents have spring training tickets to late March, and I was trying to tell them they should be more concerned, and they didn't really seem to believe me. But I'd be concerned even at that point. Just I do not see the owners wouldn't even talk about service time and lowering the free agent year. That's a non-starter for them, and for the players it's a non-starter to sign a CBA without that, and one of those sides has to budge, and because they're so confident in that part of it, it's not going to happen until one of them does. I will say one thing that's very interesting to me is how much the owners seem to want expanded playoffs, in the sense that I don't think the players really care about expanded playoffs. If you're a player, expanded playoffs, how does that hurt a player? They get more money if they win the World Series, so that's cool. You get more opportunity to win more money. But that's one thing that the players can use as a bargaining chip. One of the few things the players can use as a bargaining chip to get something they want. And so I think the players are probably going to, that's something the owners are going to get, I feel like, because it's one of the few wedges the players have. And me personally, I know I'm going off on a little tangent here, but I don't like the idea of 14 teams in the playoffs, because I don't want the NBA structure where the regular season matters, right? But not really. You don't really care until the playoffs. Except for the marquee games every now and again when the Lakers play the Warriors or whatever. I don't want that in baseball where, September is super exciting, and last September felt like a playoff chase for the Mariners and for the Blue Jays, who also didn't make it, and for the Red Sox, who barely made it. And I want that kind of thing to continue going forward, even though it's heartbreak for us and heartbreak for whoever doesn't make it. I would rather that than the end of September, you're watching a couple of 500 squads battle it out for a playoff spot that neither of them deserves. That just doesn't seem any fun to me. But I've kind of lost the thread here. To answer your real question, yeah, I don't think either side is going to have changed much in a month or so, and I think that when the change comes, it's going to be like immediate.
The one thing that I would say about that is when it comes to things like expanded playoffs, when it comes to the robot umpires, when it comes to the DH, some of the technical changes to the game and like the on the field choreography, if you want to call it that, of the way that this is all going down, those things seem to be pretty settled as the players don't care and MLB wants them and are going to get them. All of the things I see as far as the disparity between the two parties is about the money, is about who's getting paid how much and when, and at what point are they no longer free agents, and what the luxury tax threshold is. So it's interesting to see that it just seems to be about the money. And maybe that's just me just, reading the Twitter tea leaves on this and not having like a real insider position, but I haven't seen any real kind of like counter argument to, oh, we don't want to do, X change to the game. Other than like really general stuff online in terms of journalism. I'm not hearing players say we don't want robot umps. I'm hearing players say we want free agency sooner. I guess is kind of my general point there. So it's just a bummer that all of this is a dollars and cents issue when you break it down and not about the sport being played. Mikey, is that fair? Am I a little off base with any of that?
Did you repeat that?
Am I off base with saying that?
No, I mean like what you were saying.
That this fundamentally, the disparity, the reason we don't have an agreement is about the money. It's not about the rule changes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's about the money.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, they're not really doing anything to address, like the service time manipulation or how long it takes players in general, the amount of time it takes for them to become free agents. And the way that they did address it was very, very, very strange. And I think that they knew that. And earlier, you mentioned, you jokingly said that MLB is operating in bad faith. I'm not joking. They are operating in bad faith. They know that they have a lot of the leverage, but I mean, I think the players were just so nonplussed by the offer that I think you're right that a lot of it does have to do with the financial, not so much in the how the two sides want to change the game, whether it's expanded playoffs or rule changes, whatever, but actual, money on the table.
Yeah, the owners locked out the players in an attempt to, quote, speed up the process and then didn't send another offer for 3 weeks. If that's not operating in bad faith, I don't know what is.
It's an excellent point. I don't think anything more needs to be said about that. I think that this is where we are, and it sucks. It really sucks. We all love baseball a lot, both at Lookout Landing and here on INSS. And did I get that right? INSIS. But it's been really hard having not just no baseball, but like baseball being shut down to the point that there aren't pictures even on MLB.com. It's just been a really strange time. So,
but don't worry,
really hoping
they're selling jerseys. They can get money off the players' likeness.
Oh, good.
Bastards.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
We can buy the show MLB 21 edition, but not 22. Okay, well, let's close today on the Mariners need another outfielder. We have on this podcast rang the bell for a good defensive fourth outfielder, a true center fielder for this team. There is an international player, Seiya Suzuki, who is a very interesting prospect, 27 years old, 5-time Nippon Professional Baseball All-Star, 5-time Gold Glove winner, 317, 433, 636 career batting average. He seems like a monster in the NPB, but there are some questions about how his skills may translate to the majors. I guess I'll go to you first, Mikey. How do you feel about his chances in terms of the hit tool transferring over, and how good is he defensively in the outfield too?
It seems pretty likely, just based on what I have seen and read on, his savvy as it pertains to, his hit tool. RJ Anderson posted a pretty interesting article at CBS Sports where he kind of he got a hold of his, batted ball metrics and tried to kind of comp him to some players. I do think that he is going to, kind of lose out on some money because both Yoshi Tsutsugo and Shogo Akiyama have not really panned out at all. I mean, Tsutsugo, I think, got DFA'd. Akiyama's not a starter. But I also think that he's a better hitter than them. And it would be nice to be able to see all three of their NPB metrics. And in the article, RJ Anderson says that the NPB is the second best league in the world. I don't really think that's true. I think it's the KBO, but
that's probably
I'm
pretty
not an
close.
expert.
Pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. But in terms of the batted ball metrics, are pretty good. 91 mile per hour exit velo. I mean, this doesn't really matter to me, but a 13.6 degree launch angle, average, launch angle. 45% of his batted balls were 95 miles per hour faster. 26 and a half of them were between 10 and 30 degrees. So they kind of dumped all of it into, similarity scores, and the names on the list are really interesting. Really the only subpar hitters on this list are Jock Peterson, Rowdy Tellez, who is interesting, Ryan McMahon, who's barely below 100% or 100 OPS plus, and Trevor Warnick. But there's also G-Man Choi,
G-Man.
Adolis, Garcia, Bryce Harper, Pete Alonso, Teoscar Hernandez, and Austin Riley. So clearly, when he makes contact with the ball, he hits it pretty hard. It really just comes down to how that translates to, MLB. So yeah, from what I know about, his fielding, I don't think he's much of a runner. I don't think he's much of a fielder. But I do think that he has I've heard that he has a strong arm. So he probably fits in right field, and which for Mitch Haniger, I don't know what that means. But yeah, I mean, it's really just his bat. If his bat doesn't play, he's not much of an MLB player. But I think, people have comped him to Mark Canha, and I think that's pretty much the player that you're going to get, maybe with a little more power and I don't even know about fielding. But I mean, I wanted Mark Canha, to the, dismay of all of my Lookout Landing colleagues.
Well, it does slightly make you a traitor, just a little bit, but it's okay.
Yeah, whatever.
Durs, what do you think of Seiya Suzuki, and how much would you pay for him? And also, if we're not getting Seiya Suzuki, are there any other still free agent outfielders you're interested in? Because I know a couple of the guys we had looked at earlier on the podcast are taken.
Yeah, I've actually kind of come around on Seiya Suzuki. Not that I was ever out on him in the first place, but I think we had this discussion before the lockout in terms of would we rather extend Mitch Haniger or sign Seiya Suzuki for the same money. And I forget what we gave. Did we give like $490? Was that what we said, or $480? I think it was something in that range.
Damn, to who?
To either Haniger or to Suzuki.
Oh, that's a lot of money. I will save this for after. Don't worry about it.
Either way, like whatever it was that we had the framework for, I was pro Haniger, and I think it's a lot tougher for me now. Mostly because if you sign Suzuki, you get both for 1 year, and I'm like all in on 2022. But I just think that like the allure of like what Suzuki could be, and this is kind of like whenever these players come over from Japan, you never know which side they're going to fall on. Like some of them end up being really amazing, and some of them end up being like, not incredible. Like I know expectations weren't high for him, but like Dae-Ho Lee is like the one example of a guy who was like fine but not terrible, and we were all like, oh, he was pretty good from Japan. But most of the time, it's like either like a colossal like failure or stardom. It seems like, and I feel like there's not many players in the free agent market right now for whom the upside is as high as Suzuki. Like, even if we love Trevor Story, Chris Bryant, like Suzuki could be better than both of them. And that's really enticing, especially for a position where the Mariners could use another star bat. The whole thing about this is, though, that because the way the posting system works, it's not entirely the Mariners' decision to make. Or yeah, because he was posted, he's not a free agent. So
Yeah.
Which is the same way that Ohtani came over, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, the Mariners will presumably put up the maximum bid like they did with Ohtani, as will other teams like the Blue Jays and the Red Sox, and then it will be up to Suzuki to decide which team to sign with. Is that pretty much how it's going to work?
Mm-hmm.
That's my understanding of it. If that's how it works, then I don't know because apparently for Seiya Suzuki, Ichiro Suzuki was a massive inspiration for him, and I guess he used Ichiro's jersey number in Japan for a while. That could be a wedge, but also we don't know what he wants. Everyone thought that Ohtani would want to go to the place that Ichiro went to, and it turned out he wanted to carve his own legacy. And who knows if Seiya Suzuki won't want the same thing. Boston out on the position player side has not had a Japanese star yet. They had Daisuke on the pitching side. Toronto, same thing. There are plenty of places that he can go that he'll be wanted at where he can be that guy if that's what he wants. And those are also teams that have more of a history of being in the playoffs. So it's hard to know where the Mariners kind of fall in his list of preferences. Apparently he wants a place with great nachos, which, the Mariners or Seattle's known for many cuisines, but I don't know if Mexican is one of them.
Yeah, unfortunately not.
So that could be a tough look.
Is that even? I don't even know if that's a Mexican thing.
That's a good point.
It's like one of those American things that we just make. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he's got to just take him to Taco Time and see what he does.
It also he represents the potential for the Mariners to not have a Japanese player for the first time since 2000.
That's true,
right?
Yeah, and that was Chuck Brantley,
I don't know,
who's been employed this whole time, full time to be an interpreter. I hope he doesn't lose his job if they don't get Seiya.
Well, Ichiro is still around somewhere, who I'm sure still.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, he'll just hang around Ichiro. That's fair. I keep forgetting that Ichiro is part of the team.
Yeah, he lives at T-Mobile. How Kanye lived at the Atlanta Stadium for a while he was recording Donda? That's Ichiro at T-Mobile Field. He's got
that's another cool
somewhere.
That's another cool potential enticing thing to get Seiya. If he really idolizes Ichiro that much, you could literally talk to him every day if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool. I don't know if he cares about that, but
I'm embarrassed because I was racking my brain trying to remember which player we had last year. Because
we had Kikuchi.
Yeah, our dearly departed Kikuchi. Forgotten.
I like how we both went with a death thing.
Let me ask you guys both this question. If the Mariners could only sign one more player for any kind of substantial money, so Suzuki, Story, or Bryant, who do you pick of the three?
Oh, Story. Not even.
I still go Story, and the reason is positional need. Yes, the Mariners could use a center fielder, but the Mariners have a lot. Joe, we were talking about with Joe just now. The Mariners have a lot of potential guys who could make a really good outfield. There's a lot of different ways in which a good Mariners outfield alignment could be created. You could have, if Lewis is healthy and Julio is good, and then you have Haniger, or if Kelenic, wasn't there for whatever reason, or if you had Kelenic and you had Julio and you had Haniger, or you had Kelenic and there's just all these different alignments that could work. There are no third basemen in this system besides a prayer on Abraham Toro, who hasn't played third base yet for the Mariners ever. And I don't know, Luis Torrens, and if he picks up a third base glove someday, they really need a third baseman. And they need that so much more than they need an outfielder. And I would love it if they got both. But if I had to pick one, it would be Story.
I think that he is the best pure hitter. He has the best track record. I guess you could argue Bryant, but I think the combination of track record and how they're projected moving forward. Bryant's already not a good fielder, and the Giants didn't want to bring him back, which is not that does not bode well for
And
Bryant.
the Giants are now an organization with Zaidi at the helm and the things they've done the last couple of years, where I think you kind of trust their judgment, like you kind of trust the Rays' judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Especially on older
Also-
players, because that's their forte, is that the
Yeah,
Giants
right.
are all 35.
If you want to get crazy, and we've gotten crazy before, you could put Story in center field.
That sounds like a Lookout Landing article to me, Mikey.
Oh no. Here's
oh boy.
well,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean-
I'm sure the comments are not gonna mention D. Strange Gordon even once.
Dude, I think I would get eaten alive. People are so unhappy. And the other thing that I was saving is the contract projections for Suzuki are 5 years, 55 million ish.
That's nothing.
Yeah.
That's not a lot at all. 11 million. That's like
Plus a posting fee, so like you basically 75 million. That's still really not that bad.
well, and even then, that's not coming out of like the payroll. That's just
That's
the
true.
team paying that. Which I guess should be taken into account because teams are cheap, but that's if you think about it just in terms of money per war, that's like one war. That's not an investment even.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So
And it's not
I
a
think he can be worth
27-year-old.
5
Like
war.
he's in the sweet spot for exactly where we'd want to spend money on a guy too.
Yeah,
Man, talking
and
about the
teams are
Giants.
interested. Smart teams.
Talking about the Giants just got me upset. Like, where's our Darren Ruff? He had like a 150 WRC plus last year. Where do we pull that guy out of thin air?
Dude, I've seen some stupid metrics for him. Like he can rake.
So this last summer I made all my friends from college like guess who the top 5 players for WRC plus were for the Giants, and it took them
Mhm.
like literally
God.
30 guesses, and they still never got Darren Ruff. And I mentioned Darren Ruff, and like 3 of them just like logged off the chat in anger.
That's a hard
Yeah.
question. I think the great mystery of the Giants was that a dead cat bounce, or are they legitimately better at scouting older players than the rest of the league? And there is some evidence of both of those things being true, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think there's some secret sauce.
Zaidi's a good GM. It doesn't get said very much
Mhm.
because he's pretty low key, but he makes good moves and does not invest poorly, is the way I'd phrase that. Anything else for today, guys? We've been talking for a while. I think we should probably wrap it up.
Since forever, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're probably about to an hour and a half. So
Yeah, we're an hour and 17 minutes. We'll end on this one question, non-baseball related, but I know that Mikey's listened. What did you think of After Dawn? Have you listened, by the way, Durs, to the new Weekend?
I
actually really wanted to listen to it, but I was just visiting family recently, so I didn't even really get to listen to the podcast I want to listen to. So no, I haven't listened to it yet, but I do want to.
What about you, Mikey?
I will listen to it pretty much immediately, and he's actually one of my favorite artists. I just really depends on the pop, but I love like Nirvana has great pop sensibilities, and same with Cuddy. I thought that generally speaking, concept albums can go one or two ways for me. I think because they are so gimmicky that oftentimes they don't age very well.
Mm-hmm.
I think this could be a case of that, but I think I kind of think of it as art. The production per usual is just about a 10 out of 10, and maybe
Slaps.
maybe the best that he's ever had. It doesn't have a hit,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
and
my
even
thought as well.
not even just in terms of top 40, but just it doesn't have an After Hours or a Starboy or a Heartless,
In
whatever
Your
it may
Eyes,
be.
or there's
Blinding
so
Lights, yeah.
many amazing radio tracks off of After Hours. It's just not on that same level
Yeah.
of every song could potentially be a hit. It's interesting too
Yeah.
that I know Sacrifice has been one of the singles off of it, but Gasoline got a music video. And Gasoline seems like a very peculiar song to me to like be pitched as a radio single. But it's
Okay,
like,
I
it's a
kind of
good
think so
song.
too, but I also think it's my favorite song, and I think it's my most listened to off the album. But yeah, man, I think it's good.
Good.
I'm glad you asked.
Well, it's funny because the morning it came out, I logged on to where was I?
Slack.
Oh, I was on Discord, of course. I was on Discord, and it shows that you guys listen to Spotify, and like my whole friends list on the side was all listening to the Weeknd albums. Like you were, Joe was, I had 2 or 3 other people listening at the same time. So it was. I like those events. You know, when something happens and the whole world kind of stops and addresses it real quick. I thought that was cool. So yeah,
Listen,
I still never listened to Donda, which I know is like a thing I should have done.
Don't do it. Whatever.
I listened to Certified Lover Boy, and I thought it was fine.
It's like so mediocre.
Yeah.
I am never, hip to like the kind of like monoculture, like zeitgeisty kind of things that are happening. Aside from like Olivia Rodrigo's like Sour, like I'm never watching the popular TV shows.
Montero was
and even
like borderline life changing to me, though.
I knew you. Yeah, you like that. But even like Ted Lasso, I don't watch it through Apple TV. I don't watch it live. I have to wait till it. I hope I don't get arrested for this till like I could download
Cops,
it.
mute.
We won't tell anyone. Do cops listen to our show? I sure hope not. But
I hope not. Yeah, ACAB.
I have not seen Ted Lasso, for the record. I have not watched any Apple TV
Ted
shows.
Lasso?
I am not going to
It's very
out of
good.
protest for
Just
Apple.
pirate it, man.
I don't mean to be
Pirate
like a corporate shill, but Ted Lasso might be worth the cost of Apple TV on its own.
Boo.
It's so good.
Back when it was just me and Andy, I was I feel like well known for unknowingly, unconsciously, accidentally just plugging, different corporations and products. All that, like the first time I was like, oh, I got some AirPods. So here I am again. But yeah, it is very good.
Fair enough. Well, I've been told by many people I need to watch Ted Lasso, so it is on the list. I do want to watch The Foundation, so I do need to get Apple TV at some point for that. But whatever. All right, so I'm Evan, and you can find me on Twitter at EvanJamesAudio. You can find Mikey on Twitter at DisThyMikey. You can find Anders on Twitter at AndersJorstad. And I don't remember Joe's handle, but he did tell it to you earlier in the podcast. You can find the podcast. What? Go ahead.
He's Joe Doyle MLB, right?
Joe. Okay, I should.
Oh, sorry, Joe Doyle. Oh, well, now I've got it wrong. Got this.
Go find Joe if you want to find Joe. And again, he is on 7:10 in the mornings about once a week with Mike Salk, which is pretty cool. But you can find the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts, wherever it is you stream. Additionally, you can support the Patreon, but you can support the podcast on Patreon by going to patreon.com/neversunny in Seattle. Obviously, we're doing this on video now, so we're going to have this up on YouTube going forward as well. Thank you for listening, and go Mariners.